Hi, my name is Jennifer Cohn, and for those of you who know me on Twitter, I'm at Jenny Cohn1, Cohn1. If you follow my account, you know that I have been very interested in the school board wars of late. And by that, I mean the far right assault on our public education system. And what I've discovered in my own research is a heavy involvement of Christian supremacists, Christian extremists, and they have had ties to Moms for Liberty but it's not just Moms for Liberty that we have to worry about. In the course of my research, some parents actually reached out to me from Southern California to tell me that there were some far right pastors who were recruiting people to go to their school districts and disrupt school board meetings, and they were recruiting school board people to run for the school board. So I started following that situation, and recently I came upon some work by an independent journalist who's with me today. Her name is Kate Burns, and she writes for Left Coast. Oops, I'm going to screw it up. Left Coast Right Watch. And she's my new favorite independent journalist because she's done some remarkable pieces with a lot of open source information, which I love, photos and such, on a church called the Awaken Church in San Diego. Well, it's actually not just in San Diego, but she knows more about it than I do, so I'll let her tell you. But they have been involved in this sort of coordinated or seemingly coordinated targeting of public schools in Southern California. So Kate, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me on video, and it's really nice to meet you. I appreciate your work. Your articles are fantastic.
I appreciate all the work that you're doing too, Jenny, and yeah, just thrilled that we've gotten some focus on the work that we've been doing here in SoCal. I think a lot of people assume, California, Southern California, it's blue, and the reality is we have a huge block of Christian nationalists throughout California, and that dates back into history. Like there's always been a heavy evangelical movement throughout Southern California.
I didn't even know that. It's true. I assumed that California was safe until those Southern California parents reached out to me to talk about the Seven Mountains people. I want to talk a lot about your work, but first I want to know actually what brought you to researching and writing about the Awaken Church.
So obviously, I'm not originally from the USA. I'm originally from Australia, and I went to Catholic private school. It was sort of brought up around the conservative Catholic movement through my schooling. And then obviously, you've probably seen around America, there is a huge influence of Australian pastors throughout America. We have the Hillsongs, and we've got people through Florida, and it's everywhere. And I moved here prior to my cancer, which is what brought me to all of this. I traveled a lot for my work. I worked in the fashion industry and all around the world, and I would meet a lot of people within like the Hillsong movement, the C3 movement, all of these really controlling evangelical spaces. And it was always just like clicking in the back of my head, knowing what I grew up with and what I experienced at school, and the values and things that we were taught. In 2018, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I am in remission. So that's great news. I'll be in full remission as of next year. I'll be 5 years, so that's amazing. And around that time, so that was 2018. That was as, obviously Trump was in power. There was a lot going on. There was so much noise. And I was overwhelmed by what was happening around me. And with this extra time I had on my hands while I wasn't working, I thought, well, rather than being overwhelmed, why don't I dig into something that I can focus on, and in some way become like an expert in this particular area, rather than being totally overwhelmed by everything and trying to
the place.
Everything. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that started in 2018, and then in 2019, I was doing some work, checking what churches we have, what denominations they are, all through this area. And
this is San Diego?
Yeah, this is from basically from Los Angeles down to San Diego. I'm based in LA. And I spent a lot of time in San Diego. So I suppose that's how it sort of came about. I started seeing like the Awaken churches, and well, at the time it was C3. And so I started looking.
Can you quickly tell me what C3 stands for? Because you also mentioned the C3 movement.
Yeah, so the C3 movement, so that is Phil Pringle and Chris Pringle, again, Australian, New Zealanders. That's again a global evangelical network, churches all over the world. I think it's about 300 and something locations that they had at one point. So Jürgen and Leanne, who are the founders of Awaken Church, they're originally from Australia. And they came up through C3, and Jürgen himself went to the Hillsong College. So they've known the Houstons for decades, and they were also working with Chris and Phil Pringle. So when C3 was big, and it was around the same time that sort of Hillsong was in there, you know, before all the scandals came out, there was a lot of work done by some Australian journalists on the prosperity gospel. And there was a piece by Channel 9 News, and it was like conning people out of millions of dollars for Christ, right? And so I think over the years, like, you know, ever since I finished school in 99, you know, I think the Christian element and religion's always been something that I've always leaned to and read about. So whenever it came up in the news, I was like, yep, okay. In 1999 through to early 2000 was also when Frank Houston was found out to be a pedophile. And so that was huge.
He was connected with which church? With the C3?
No, so he was with Hillsong.
He's Hillsong.
Yeah,
right.
So he's Brian's father. And so they kind of meshed together. They're a similar movement. They've both had scandal after scandal after scandal after scandal, like financial abuse, spiritual abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, you name it. And when I realized in 2019 it was Jürgen and Leanne that was down at C3, I was like, hang on, I know them. So I was like, okay, well, this makes sense, because I've been quite passionate about, I think in Australia, it's easy to look at America and be like, whoa, Christian nationalism, y'all are crazy. Whereas a lot of that influence has come from Australia. So I think
interesting.
I think for me, I was like, well, I really want to get this point home, because some of these more extreme pastors are, you know, Australian or have been influenced by Australian churches, the Hillsong C3. And where Awaken itself came about was in 2019. So in 2005, Jürgen and Leanne moved to San Diego to plant a church with C3. There was no C3 locations down there, and they originally started in like a car park of a back of a church location, and since then have moved on to their 7th, onto their 8th location. But in 2000, so they were with C3, chugging along. As Trump came into power and the country started to be more influenced by this, you know, really strong right-wing version of Christianity evangelicalism, and Jürgen was, you know, attending Mar-a-Lago events. They went and saw the Denusa 2000 Meals, you know, so they're all sort of tied in with that.
With Trump, do you think, or just in general? I mean, Trump would be there, like his events.
I'm pretty sure that when they filmed, yeah, no, he was definitely there. Trump was there because he was filmed coming through into the main ballroom and all of that kind of thing.
Right.
And this, so this part is where there's nothing front facing that is being communicated by Awaken or C3 But through my research and speaking with folks that are still at C3 or were at C3 and people that were at Awaken, Jürgen's language and narrative became more radical, biblical war, and really getting heavily into politics. And Phil Pringle and Chris Pringle, this is what I've heard from behind the scenes, were concerned. And it was put to Jürgen that he needs to step back from, this kind of language and really getting involved in political wars and political narratives and all of this kind of stuff. And he refused. And so January 2020, Awaken changed to, C3 changed to Awaken Church. So all of the San Diego locations were then flipped to Awaken. So
he was too radical then for C3 even?
He was too radical.
Wow.
And I know that you've seen a bit of, he's been banned. He was banned on Instagram in like 2019, 2020. And then, now he's on Rumble and Parler, all of the alt websites. And if you have a look at what this man posts, he is extreme. He has a lot of hate in his heart, but also that concerning, as from 2021 to 2022, to where we are today, we've seen how he's built on that. Whereas I think a lot of people were like, without C3, that church will fold, or it doesn't have that network or the global support. Unfortunately, we've seen it go the other way. It's continued to grow. Their events that they hold with their different ministries are continuing to getting larger and have wider reach. And the people that they have speak at their events or who attend, all the flags are being raised. So that's sort of where they started from, and how I got into it was definitely the Australian link. My schooling, I think, just beat around the time 1999, 2000. There was a lot of sex scandals throughout the churches. So it was all around that time. It was, in my ecosystem.
How did you hook up with the Left Coast Right Watch?
So I was always a big fan of their work. I've been pretty active within protest movement in Los Angeles, dealing with Proud Boys and anti-vaxxers and all of that kind of stuff. And so I was a big fan of their work. And I would always be, I was posting my pieces, then I'd send a post to them, and I'd be like, have you seen
my dog? Sorry, hold on.
That's all right, I can't hear him, it's fine. So I would just reach out. I'd be like, have you seen this? Someone needs to have a look at this. And Abner was like, well, why don't you have a crack? And the rest is history, I suppose. There is a network of us that work through many different areas in SoCal. You've mentioned that you've spoken to some of the parents here, and I'm also in a group chat with the folks that you've been speaking with, because it all crosses over.
Right. So Sky Spider.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never spoken with her in person or anything, but she does really good work too.
Kelly's great. And so Kelly and I knew each other from protest movement. She was heavily covering the anti-vax movement, and I was involved in a situation outside of the Cedar-Sinai Breast Cancer Centre in 2021, and Kelly was there. Mm-hmm. And so we sort of connected from there. And when we realised, I'd see her post a photo, I'd be like, hey, that's Sam Duth from Awaken Church. What's he doing there?
Right.
And so we connected through that. And then I was brought into this group because of, the focus that I've been working on in Christofascism is being able to support the parents with all of the information that we have about who these people are, what they're about, and who they're connected with.
Because they are targeting the school boards, right?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
That's
like,
like,
I think maybe I should. I'm gonna try. We'll see if it works. I'm gonna try to share the video that I put on my Twitter account. I know you've seen it. It was posted actually by the account Christian Nightmares from.
Yeah, I think I speak with them as well. Yeah, I think that, yeah,
let
the
me
video
see if
is
it
wild.
works. Let me give it a try here.
Looks like it.
Okay, wait. No, I gotta go to the beginning.
That's all right.
There we go.
Yeah, so this was it's madness. So Emerge Camp, so that's a ministry, a part of Awaken Church, like the umbrella. And they break down ministries within patriarchal values. So Emerge Men is a ministry. They meet once to twice a week for morning prayer circles at like 5 a.m. And then they also have conferences like that one once a year.
It won't stop.
That's all right. And so
there we go. Did that play or did that not work?
I saw it, yeah.
Could you hear it?
No, I couldn't hear it.
Oh, there was no sound. Okay, darn it. Well, anyway, yeah. So that was the Emerge conference, right? And that is hosted by Awaken. Can you tell me about that a little bit?
Yeah. So C3, that was a part of C3. Emerge was a part of C3 originally. And so it dates back. I think the furthest we could find back was like 2010 or something like that. And it was a golf tournament. So very simple golf tournament, raising some money, nothing hectic. Right. And then over the years, it got bigger and bigger, and the elements became more militaristic, I suppose, like definitely influenced by this holy war narrative. So the year...
what that video, is that from, this is from this year or last
year? That's from this year. Yeah.
Okay. So that was Jürgen is the one who flew in on the helicopter, right?
Cult leader Jürgen flew in on the helicopter. And so 2019, it got bigger. There wasn't so much of that on, but once it switched over to Awaken, this was around the time that Awaken connected with Charlie KIRK. And obviously then developed into, at the start of this year, TP USA Faith and Awaken became official partners. So
official partners.
They're official partners. It's like, you know, sponsorship program. So prior to that, they were playing footsies for a long time. And in 2020 and 2021, I believe, 21 and 22, Charlie KIRK attended the conferences and spoke at the conferences. After the 21 event, Charlie then went on to mentor 200 to 300 guys on Zoom calls. So at that point, I was like, okay, so this is bigger than just having a guest speaker as Charlie KIRK. This is continuing to go into something a little bit deeper. And
200 congregants from the Awaken Church?
Yeah, 200 men from the Emerge Men. There were, you know, there's definitely a lot more of them than that. As you can see, there was 3,000 people at this event this year. So it's definitely grown, but I think what we saw this year with the front-facing images that they were putting out, like you said, like, you know, I'm using all open source information. Sure, I do interviews and things like that, but a majority is like open source, and this is stuff that they're putting out there. And this year especially, there was just that huge shift into like combat training. and just the language that was used in the lead up to it, the folks that attended, the guest speakers, like we had David Harris Jr. was there again. He's spoken at the church.
And who can you tell people who he is? I don't know that everybody know. I know
So
sort of who
David
he
Harris
is, but
Jr. is, I think he's one of the leaders of Blacks for Trump. And he is a raging homophobe. And he was one of the earlier folks to call, queer people groomers. Like, he was on the forefront of that.
okay.
And so that's why he was invited to Awaken Church, because
Of course.
that's their whole thing.
Mhm.
So he spoke, and I think, when you look at the type of folks that Jürgen has, the only black speakers that they will have will be Trump guys, right? So the ones that toe the line, and the ones that are like homophobic, and all of the things, and believe in biblical law and whatnot, because they're wildly racist, anti-Semitic, all of it. We know what Christian nationalism is about at this point. So they are one of the most extreme, in my opinion, definitely in Southern California anyway.
Have you seen them post things that are anti-Semitic?
Oh, Jürgen on his, I think it's Parler, Getter or Parler, one of the ones. I've got all the screenshots, I can share them with you. He's big on Soros, and the World Economic Forum, and Soros buses in Antifa to protest, like all the dog whistling, and obviously their view of, because they're Christian Zionists as well, so their view of Israel, so that they can have the Holy Land in the end times and convert people.
Right.
So there's that whole piece, and Jürgen Lian, been in Israel a few times the last few years. But I think it's like that, I think it's like this umbrella that these people all fit under, and the link that they have back to Trump. Like, Jürgen's like a MAGA man through and through. He is a Trump man. That's not going to change. And the same with Leanne. The other concern, when it really,
not DeSantis supporters, you don't think? Well,
no, they love Ron DeSantis, but when it comes down to, like, the two of them against each other, they're Trump people. But at the same time, they were thrilled with DeSantis and his Don't Say Gay laws, all of that. Sure. They're big fans of the work he's been doing. But when it really escalated is when they had the, what's it called? What is it? Reawaken America tour with...
the Mike Flynn and Clay Clark. It's NAR affiliated.
So that was at Awaken Church. That's where it was held, in San Diego.
That's right. I didn't make that. Thank you. Oh, that's so interesting. Was it during that one where Flynn said that we have only one God or something? I mean, only one religion. If we're one nation under God, we should have only one religion. Was that it?
And Charlie said the same. Charlie KIRK has since spoken. He spoke only a few months ago at Awaken, and he said the same thing. There's only one true God. There's only one true religion, and that's really the Awaken's whole thing. It's, you either believe in this born again Christianity, hateful evangelicalism, purity culture, or you're going to hell, right? So. Right. But yeah, when they had that, like, prior to having the Reawaken America tour, they'd already had Candace Owens speak, Dinesh, I've gone mentally blank.
It's okay. I actually was hoping we could just pause for a minute on Clay Clark and the Reawaken America tour, because I did an article on them. That's the first time I'd ever heard of the New Apostolic Reformation, the dominionist movement. And I did an article on them, and it was either in June or August of 2022. And it was about the Reawaken America tour and how it's sponsored by NAR affiliated Charisma News. And, yeah, Clay Clark is NAR affiliated. And so I'm wondering, NAR is the abbreviation, of course, you know this, for New Apostolic Reformation. Um, have you seen, what other ties have you seen between the Awaken Church and the NAR movement?
Oh, plenty. So, Lance Wallnau has spoken there. And he was obviously at the Reawaken tour. Eric Metaxas, Seth Gruber, like there's so many people tied up.
I've heard of Seth. Who's he?
Seth is like, his whole thing is forced birth. He is a radical anti-abortionist. And so he was like really big around like working towards that, obviously, when that all went down late last year. But there's ties for days, like obviously Sean Foyt is a huge partner with Awaken, obviously also with Turning Point USA Faith. And that's probably where I'm concerned. It's like it's the
Jim
whole
Garlow too, right? I saw he had
Jim
appeared.
Garlow, he speaks there all the time. So they're all connected in that way. And I think, I've learned a lot about NAR through my research previously to all this is, back with C3 and the Hillsong influence and all of this kind of thing. So, obviously Sean wouldn't call himself NAR, but he has grown up with NAR all around him. Like
And he was ordained by a NAR church in Pennsylvania called
and like his mentors,
Life Ministries, which is NAR Apostle Abby Abelness's church. So he's definitely affiliated with the movement.
Oh, he's definitely affiliated. Like his mentors are Cheyanne, who is like true
NAR apostle, major apostle,
and Lou Engle. And like he's also like right there, and they were the founders of the call. So there's a whole story tied up in that. How we have Sean Foyt today is because he attended the call in like the year 2000 and was inspired by this charismatic Christianity, and it was a heavily partisan event. And that's really where that started.
Oh, he was also, wasn't he also, was it Bill Johnson's church?
Yeah, so he's
Bethel Church, which is also a NAR church. He was affiliate. He was like their musician.
Well, he released a whole lot of his music through there. So Sean came to Bethel. It was like, he ran for he ran for a position on council or something like that, or Congress. No, he ran for Congress in like 2019. But he also, so he came to Bethel because he's very interested in that supernatural healing, biblical law, the seven mountains, all of that kind of piece. And that
people who are listening, I mean, if people are listening, they probably follow me, which means they probably know about the seven mountains. But just in case, can you just briefly explain what the seven mountains are?
Okay, so the seven mountains comes out of NAR and Lance Wallnau, and the seven mountains is a prophecy that biblical law and biblical leaders will be on the top of each of these mountains, and these seven mountains represent society. So education, government, media, military, all of the key influences on society today are the seven mountains. And the idea is that these biblically inspired, and obviously they're all men because we can't be having any women in this situation because this is the brand of Christianity that they want to push, so that these positions of power will be led by someone that holds these beliefs and that will reinforce them. So I think, like, if you look at Mike Johnson, like, he's there.
Yeah,
he's there, and that is what they wanted, so
the government mountain. And Awaken seems very focused lately on the education mountain. So what I wanted to say just briefly, I saw that Jurgen, actually, there was a video he posted where he was defending, I guess he was being criticized for allowing women to be pastors. And he said, okay, well, yes, we allow it, but they're under my authority. They're all under my authority. The NAR is kind of weird. They do allow women pastors too. And I don't know that they put that under my authority caveat onto it. Their biggest thing about them is the dominionism, the Seven Mountains, and I mean the biggest
Yeah,
problem
look,
with them. And
definitely,
then of course the faith healing I think is pretty dangerous for congregants if they're going to rely on that as opposed to real healing.
super
Yeah.
concerning. Like, I could speak for days about that because they heal people with cancer all the time, and obviously that really
That's close to home,
grinds
right?
my gears because it's not possible, and people die with that shit. So, but you know, they definitely get into all of that. But yeah, like with Awaken, they're heavily involved. Like, you know, originally we first started sort of really activating within the political scene was in 2020 with COVID, and we saw a lot of the pastors and key influences of the church turning up to city council in San Diego and pushing back on mask bans and just generally, you know, having a wild old time.
Let me ask you this, so which pastors are you talking about? So Jurgen and
So Sam Duth, who's like
he's
one
with
of the,
Awaken, also Sam Duth.
yeah, and then Lewis Uredell. So Lewis Uredell isn't a pastor. He is, though, a prayer leader, and he is the ambassador for Turning Point USA Faith at Awaken Church.
Lovely. And tell me about his tattoo.
He has lovely tattoos, especially a particular one that is a 3% tattoo. Out in the open, right on his hand. He loves to show it off. He's not ashamed to show it off. You know, and this was brought up early when we saw him attending Awaken. We're like, what are we doing here? Like, we've got people that
guy, yeah,
3%, and like, there's definitely more elements. It's not just one guy. You know, obviously San Diego has a long history with KKK, Nazism, Christian nationalism, and we're seeing a lot of folks come to like Emerge or any of the other events, or you know, when Charlie speaks at the church, when Candace Owen speaks at the church, when Tucker Carlson speaks at the church, which is just wild to me to even say that. Like, Tucker Carlson at a church, you know, what are we doing here? But that's what they're going for. So it started off with city council, vaccine mandates, mask mandates, and a lot of the language was obviously like, you know, God will heal us, and we don't need this, and this is tyranny, blah 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 blah. And obviously because churches got closed down. Awaken was fined several times early on in the pandemic because they didn't close. They just totally disregarded laws, whatever. That's when they linked up with Sean Foyt, and that's when they started doing a lot of let us worship stuff that was, and you know, it happened down in San Diego and then all around the country and world, actually.
Actually, let me ask you this. Have they, so as far as the targeting of the schools, I know that they have attended school board meetings.
Yeah.
Did anyone from Awaken run for school board that you know of?
So
were they backed by Jurgen? Were candidates backed by Jurgen?
So school board wise, so I suppose with like the elections and things like that, so they have a political activist group that they work alongside. It's called Remnant, and they do biblical training for to work in like council or political work or whatever. That was, so they were doing that prior, but it was actually this year that they've actually launched their own political arm. So I don't know how much you know about the sorry,
who launched their own political arm, Remnant or Awaken?
No, Awaken. They have their own flag. So I don't know how much people know about the IRS, but that's highly illegal. And so they have a pack, and it's called Awaken Political Pack. And so for the last couple of years, they've been putting out like voter guides, right? So members or candidates that they feel uphold the vision that they want to uphold. Last year it was like even bigger because they had the political arm really focused. They had a whole lot of different local political candidates come and speak at the church. Amy Amy Reihart, is that her name? She was like an anti-vax.
She lost, but yes, she lost in
Yeah.
this last election, I think.
Yeah, and so last year they were successful, I think, on the wider category. So they trained 70 people in the church. None of them specifically got up, but preferred. There was like 35 preferred people that they did get up.
That were actually elected.
Yeah, so they weren't directly trained by the church, but they were preferred, and that information was set out through all of their channels. And what we saw last year, that's only just the building blocks, you know. So they're starting to, like, you know, they even had ballot drop-offs and stuff. So
right, the church is very interested, these churches anyway, in ballot harvesting.
Super. It's like,
yeah, that's their big
super
thing.
Yeah, their engagement piece is to have you engaged in politics. There's no wall between that. It is their duty to be activated in society and to be in hold positions of power. That is what they're about. And they're doing a good job in San Diego.
Really, you know, so tell me about their flag. This is their political flag? Or
so prior to, like, all of this, like I said, they had Remnant that they were working with on site, and they would lease out their rooms for people to do training and stuff in there. And, you know, we've been pushing back on this for a really long time. Like, there's myself and Awaken, Church Exposed, who do a lot of the work on here, and we've been trying to raise the alarm, saying, why is this allowed to happen? You know,
it's another account, right? At Awaken Church.
At Awaken Exposed. Yeah.
Awaken
So it was the best day in my life when I thought I was the only person covering this. And one day it came up 5 feet, and I was like, oh my God. So since then, we've obviously become very close, and we work together. So it can be a lot to watch all of this content, because, you know, they have podcasts, videos, like there's hours and hours a day that you could consume out of this church.
What I think the change, though, is that you're right, that they started to finally make progress. And it is actually very similar to Moms for Liberty. And my concern, though, is that people think that they aren't aware that there are other parallel and overlapping, really, because I think the forces behind them are probably very similar, if not the same. Pastors, for example, who are pushing the same thing as Moms for Liberty. You know, Moms for Liberty became so public, it became in some ways easier to push back against them. But if people don't know about these individual pastors, I mean, there's 3 that I was sort of tracking. One was Jurgen, who I only learned about very recently, which is why I contacted you, and then Tim Thompson, and who's the third one? Jack Hibbs. Jack
Hibbs, Rob McCoy, like, you know.
Someone just told me about Rob McCoy. I hadn't heard of him yet.
Oh God, wait until you dive into that one.
But I know that Jim Doman, Jim Doman he runs the Church United, right? That's coordinating all of these California fringy pastors together. And the thing is, they're a minority, but that they have such high turnout, and they're doing, you know, they met, and their messaging operation, their organization is already there, because they're organizing through their churches, and they're all fanatical, so they all go to their churches on a regular basis. And yeah,
you know, back with the political arm of Awaken, like now that you know, the flag is like, I don't know, it's like Awaken Church and political arm or whatever, and it's, you know, it's like nothing offensive or anything like that, but like flying a flag that you have a political arm is like so illegal and so against what these churches are supposed to be about. So the other thing is that they utilize, which started probably midway through last year, they have a tech service that they have for all of, you know, the folks that come to their church, and usually it was utilized for, you know, we're having our Christmas carol sing along, whatever, or you know, this is happening, we're having this guest speaker. That to be used for ballot harvesting, started to be used to call people up for protests, and then it escalated to this is the information of the school board. This is the meeting that we're having. It's at 7 o'clock at this school and you should turn up. And these are the talking points that you should have. So,
and it's very intimidating, I imagine, to the parents and the kids who are in those school districts to have these people show up, and especially someone like Louis Uredale with his
exactly, and
tattoo.
they roll in packs. And, you know, so it's not just them, it's also this group called Freedom Revival Events in San Diego. And that's another, they're more of like a protest activated thing, group. And they've held big events down in San Diego for the last few years. And then there's another group that links in, it's called the Battle Cry. And that's basically just a trans hate group. They're like Mums for Liberty. I would potentially say they're probably worse. And that's Carrie Jean Boyler. She was
I haven't
like,
heard of this at all yet. Oh my gosh, I've got research to do.
I'll send you all of that, because they're all loosely tied in and they show a front. So, you know, they'll organize loosely to all come up together. So, you know, poor parents that are sitting in these meetings, not expecting for 20 people to roll in deep with the same talking points, aggressive, loud, you know, prepared. You know, they have like their folders of all the talking points, and some of them are like experienced public speakers.
So here's something I wanted to ask you. The Family Research Council, or maybe even, so that, you know, they have the culture impact team concept, where they use they organize their most networked congregants and effective speakers to form these groups who then go out into the community to take over politics, local politics. Have you seen any connections between them and the Awaken Church?
So Jürgen sits on a lot of different organizations, boards. He hasn't himself turned up on the influencer guide for the Focus on the Family, but he has been in the rooms with these same people. Like, you've got to think, like, Charlie Kirk held his first pastor summit in San Diego with Jürgen last year before. I've got it on my, I'll send
so Charlie Kirk, he's the founder of Turning Point USA. I mean, I know you know that. So I wanted to say Focus on the Family and Family Research Council, they were both founded by the same guy, James Dobson. I don't know if they officially work together, but they do seem to kind of work together. Maybe it's official, I don't know. But I noticed that the Focus on the Family has like official sort of subsidiaries in each of the states. And then the Family Research Council has a map that then you can go to each of the states and it links to the same subsidiaries. So in California, that's the California Family Council. And I just wonder to what extent this is sort of being coordinated at the national level, or if Awaken is more of a copycat.
I think Awaken, in a way, it's its own beast, because Jürgen is his own beast and Leanne is his own beast, her own beast. And quickly to touch back on what we were talking about earlier is like, you know, it's easy for a lot of people to say, oh, Awaken's progressive, they let women preach, but it's pinkwashing at the highest order. You know, Leanne will come on stage and say that she serves her husband, right? So they can speak, but it's under the authority of Jürgen, right? So there's no freedom or anything like that. And the message that Leanne sends is very much like, you know, you've got to serve your husband and to be mum at home and look after the kids. And, you know, like there's a woman's place in the church, right?
Tell me about when they met. I mean, there's a bit of an age disparity, right?
So, yeah. So Leanne and Jürgen met at Leanne's church in Sydney, and Jürgen was a youth pastor. He was 23 and Leanne was 16. He has tripped up in one speech where he said he would have been 22, so that would have made her 15. But look, either way, extremely, not only the gap, but, you know, like, for me, I'm like, it tracks.
I heard that might have actually been legal in Australia, but still.
So So the legality, look, we have the legalities, yeah. Unfortunately, I don't know where our laws are in Australia at the moment, but it's legal, like to the law. But I think that it just puts that relationship in a, like, that sort of displays of what that relationship was built off and what it's become, right? Yeah, holds all the power. But yeah, like, and then they were engaged at 17. She was pregnant, 18. So yeah, all very, very, very quick. Very young girl, 7 years difference. He was 23. Like, I would consider you kind of an adult, right? 16-year-old. I don't know. I obviously have my very strong opinions on that, but look, legal aside, I just think it says a lot about the kind of environment that the two of them are brought up in and what their views are. But with the school pieces, so I just want to give a bit of a shout out to a few people, because I'm sure that a lot of people will be like, oh, what can I do? Where can I read? So obviously Sky Spider is someone, and we can probably put some show notes in or something like that and link. But there's also a great resource for folks to use, and it's called SoCal Extremist Watch. And the parents that some of the parents that you've touched base with, it's part of the same group, and they've built this website, and it actually highlights the regions, so the school districts where they've been targeting, and it also has a section on extremist pastors. And so I've written a couple of pieces for them as well in there, and that's a great resource to sort of get a picture of like the who's who, the how, the what's been going on in our backyard for a while kind of thing. Sky Spider, Daisy Gardner, Charty B, Awaken Exposed, obviously. These are sort of the folks that are, that we've all we've all crossed paths because we're all focusing on a specific organization or a specific style of beliefs or whatever, and we're just constantly crossing because we'll see Awaken pastors turn up at an event in Santee, and then we'll see TPSA guys turn up here, and like it just how it is all connected to the back. We don't have like a black and white picture of what that looks like. There is no diagram that says this person told these people to do this and this. But we know there is astroturfing or and I think like I always think back
with Lance Wallnau, I noticed so Cure Resistance is a really good account who focuses mostly on Pennsylvania, but she actually does national stuff. And she she found a clip where Wallnau was saying that he's training pastors to be apostolic hubs. Well, he didn't say apostolic, he just said hubs, church hubs. And that Jack Hibbs, who's one of these Southern California pastors, is part of that, has one of those hubs that he's training. And then it occurred to me, I was like, well, Wallnau is on the board of the Truth and Liberty Coalition, which is in Colorado, and is doing the same kind of stuff there with school boards there. They're one of the ground zeros, actually, for the sort of Christian right assault on public education. And Truth and Liberty sponsored a Family Research Council event recently. So it all kind of, I don't know that Family Research Council is pulling all the strings, but I feel like they inspired a lot of it, and they keep an eye on a lot of it. And of course, the Family Research Council then is an affiliated organization with the Council for National Policy, which is like massive umbrella. So that's kind of what the way I'm sort of, you end up just always going in the same circle and coming back to the same groups.
Exactly. And I think like, when I think about the assault on the schools, right? I think about like Bannon and Flynn in 2018, 2019. So they laid this out for us. They told us that this is where they were going to focus. They were going to focus on taking over smaller areas, cities, school boards, and they've committed to the bit. And whether or not it's through direction, face to face, or through communication, or just these messages being in the ether, these churches have picked the message up and they are running with it. The other thing that I just, when you look at grassroots groups, movements and things like that, the one thing that we all always notice with these groups is just the backing of, even things like placards and, all of the documentation and talking points, everything's so well organized, and I suppose the structure is there, which you don't usually see in grassroots organizing at the start, right? Whereas this came in hot into the movement, and they already had their documents, their work, everything was already organized. So there's definitely a source that's pushing down information, but I don't think it's just particularly one. I think it's a whole movement. Like these churches and leaders, they're all connected.
And for national
these are
policy
conversations
leaders,
that they have in their meetings is about trying to get biblically led, 7 mountains and things like that. That's what they want. So moving all in the same direction together, right? And I think that because
what do you
of
think is their ultimate goal for the public schools?
Well, is that it's biblically led education. So
do you think they want to destroy them or take them over, or both, or either or?
Both. Like Awaken has launched its own, they've got their own school. So they've got a hybrid K through 7 school, which is again biblical education. So like 6,000 years. We worked on Earth with dinosaurs and stuff like that, like all that nonsense. And that's what they want. So he's also got a university. But I think that what they want to do is they want to strip the money out of public schooling. If they're not projecting and if they're not teaching biblical values, they will seek to destroy these schools. They want more money that they can feed into their charter schools, because essentially it's more power. And I think like a lot of us will know that working this is, if we have the power of people's brains and the education they receive and who their leaders are, we can control them, right? So I always think about what we're living through in America at the moment, and the information age and access to information. And I feel like as a whole, the generations are going, hang on, we actually have access to education now, and these are things we're learning. And I think that freaks this movement out, and that they want to have a community of people that you don't believe in the secular world. You believe in what we've told you, so they can control the minds. Because ultimately, we saw them activated to vote for Trump, and to vote all of these things in, is because they're controllable. They're putty in these people's hands. And I think the goal for that is that they can have these obedient, biblically educated children that are told not to trust your feelings. You're told not to trust these things. You are told to trust your superior, right? So whether it's your pastor, whatever it is, prophet. And, as we continue to go through that, what that looks like in 10 years, you've got a whole lot of people that are undereducated, that are told that they could only to follow that their leaders, and you have a more nationalistic, patriotic community that will get in line, because that's all it is about. It's about getting in line.
I wonder what it is that seems to have turbocharged them, though. I mean, the pandemic, I think maybe it was part of it. It gave them an excuse to attack public schools, or over using mask mandates as a pretext. But look, I think the Supreme Court ruling on gay marriage, do you think that did it?
Look, I think that was a start. Look, I think that as Christianity as a whole and everything, like, we're becoming a more secular nation. I think it's a whole lot of factors. You've got immigration, you've got Trump, you've got all of these things coming into play. And I think that where we currently sit right now, especially after the elections last week, is that they're desperate. They are desperate. And so they are trying to grab onto whatever power that they can to try and hold on to this traditionalist 1950s idea of how America should look and feel and behave.
Yeah, I saw a chart that showed that the people who identify as very religious is the smallest category of, like, they did 3 categories: very religious, moderately religious, and not religious at all. And the very religious is the smallest category, and it has like this steep decline. It's been on a downward trajectory, but really, really dipped in 2018, which I thought was really interesting because Trump was in office, right? So
definitely, but we do see that there's a huge growth in this brand of Christianity that we're dealing with.
Well, I feel like it's reactive a little bit, like they're freaking out. That's kind of what I mean. Like that's why I feel like they're seeing this shift and they're panicking, and so they turbocharge going after the schools. But it could also be because Gen Z is coming of age and they're really freaked out about Gen Z.
They're totally freaked out about Gen Z. We've seen how they responded through the protest movements in 2000. The generations have had enough of the crap, basically. And so I think that they're identifying, hang on, we're going to have a little bit of trouble unless we get a hold of this education and trying to influence what these people believe. I think that as society changes, it's that desperation to hold on. And my concern is the more desperate they get, the more desperate they get. And with the narratives, the dialogue and everything that they use, spiritual war, biblical war, all of these things, these people are armed.
Their enemy is demonic.
Calling their enemies demonic. They dehumanize anyone that's not within their specific brand of religion. And the whole, they've been hugely involved in the schools because of LGBTQ pushback. They're explicit. They believe that LGBTQ people should be healed and can be healed through Jesus Christ.
Right. So the Jim Doman guy who runs the Church United, that's uniting all of those pastors, calls himself ex-gay, right? Or ex-homosexual.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's terrifying, and it's a lot. So I think for folks that have watched this and are like, what? Jenny shared a lot of my work. When we post this, I'll post some links of people to follow. And how to get active.
Tell everyone your Twitter handle and where they can find your work.
Yeah. So you can find me on Twitter, unfortunately. You can find me at Kate R.Q. Burns. You can find me there. You can also find me on Blue Sky, all of the other ones. I am the most active on Twitter still, just because that's where a lot of the weirdos that I follow are active. You can also follow me on Instagram, and that's Kate_Burns_Chad. And you can read my work at Left Coast Right Watch. So that's Left Coast Right Watch on Instagram and Twitter. And I'm working on more pieces at the moment. We're really gearing up for what's to come, because the political campaigning that we've already seen from them, we didn't see on full display in the presidential election last time. So this is what they've been training for, is what to come this year. So it'll be next year. It'll be interesting to see how they activate that, what success they get on the school boards. They're not giving up. So I don't think anyone should be like, oh, well, the people have written about it and stuff. No. They're not giving up. They're continuing full steam ahead.
And frankly, these guys have not received mainstream media attention at all. It's all just independent journalists like you.
And I think, look, mainstream media, it's obviously had a whole lot of cuts. A lot of departments are being stripped out. I know a lot of religion reporters over the last couple of years have lost their jobs and things like that, just through lack of resources and lack of funding or whatever. And there's a lot of people like me that have taken it upon ourselves to be like, all right, well, we just need to watch this and make sure that we're tracking who, where, how, why. But there definitely needs to be, and I think it comes back to what I said originally, is that SoCal piece, that people think we're Southern California, we're hippy dippy or whatever, we're blue no matter who or whatever. But again, there is history here that there has been a strong block of evangelicals that have been working through California for decades, and that this reignition, Trump coming back into power and the talk of biblical war and all those things has just brought it to the forefront and re-energized them. So I think it's just about becoming educated, seeing, and like I said, it becomes overwhelming. So I think it's about learning and then finding out where can you best impact. So, you know, like my skills are collecting information, writing and hot takes or whatever, but you know, other people's skills might be something else. It might be building websites, it might be
organizing to go to the meetings, right?
This is the thing. So turning up and going to the meetings, and I know that parents can also be intimidated, because sometimes you can look at this and go, Proud Boys are at the school board, I'm not going to school board, you know, like, because they are intimidating. I think it's about organizing within your community, and standing up, because once they have the power, they won't let go of the power. It's not like something we just have to wait out for a couple of years. It doesn't work like that with them. They have no interest in handing over any power once they achieve it. So I think educating yourself, and for whatever reason, if you don't see your school region in any of the work we do, maybe just check in on your school boards and so go to the next school board meeting and see if these people are turning up, because we're only as good as the information that we get, right? So we do know a lot of people that go around to school boards. Kelly's one of them, but I just think we have to be involved in this moment. This is our moment, and as intimidating it is wild out there at the moment, but we have a place in our community to speak up. And I think if you get together as a collective, you stick to your beliefs and what you know and what you understand is right for wider education, what's best for our children, we can make impact. And even just being present is something, you know. But there's lots of people, like I said, like me, are out here, and if any point anyone's seeing these things, hang on, I want to know more about that, or hey, I used to go to Awaken Church, I would love to tell you my story. My DMs are always open.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you so much, Kate. It was really interesting to talk to you. I appreciate you giving me the time, and I can't wait to read your next article. Please send it to me when you publish it, and I would love to take a look at it.
I will, for sure. Writing a piece about Sean Foyt at the moment.
Oh,
so
fantastic. Okay.
yeah, so yeah, another whole subject, but again, tied in. But yeah, I appreciate you so much, just having me on and taking an interest in this, and I just hope more people will open their eyes and have a look what's going on in these places.
I hope so too.
This is everywhere.
It is. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.